Royal Guard Story, Part 1. The morning fog hung thick over Windsor Castle as Captain James Morrison adjusted his ceremonial sword for the third time. 25 years of service to the crown had taught him that unusual orders often came wrapped in ordinary language. But today's briefing had left him more unsettled than usual. The Queen's private secretary had been unusually formal, even for palace standards. When delivering the sealed instructions, Captain Morrison, the elderly man, had said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Her Majesty requires immediate access to the royal vault beneath the east wing. Queen Camilla has been inside for over 6 hours without communication. The situation requires your immediate attention." Now, standing before the ornate entrance to the restricted section of the castle, James felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The royal vault was no ordinary storage room. Built centuries ago, it housed the most precious artifacts of the monarchy, items so valuable and historically significant that only the reigning monarch and their chosen successor were granted access. The fact that Camilla was inside alone, and for such an extended period, sent alarm bells ringing through his mind. His radio crackled to life. "Captain, this is Control. Any update on the situation?" The voice belonged to Commander Sarah Chen, his immediate superior, and one of the few people in the palace who knew the full extent of what lay beneath the castle's ancient stones.
Active control.
Still no response from the Queen Consort. "I'm proceeding with the entry protocol as instructed." James checked his watch again. 6 hours and 43 minutes. In all his years of service, he had never known anyone to spend more than an hour in the vault. The security protocols alone made extended stays nearly impossible. The vault's entrance was a masterpiece of both medieval craftsmanship and modern security technology. The original stone archway, carved with the royal coat of arms, now housed biometric scanners, pressure sensors, and electromagnetic locks that would make Fort Knox envious. James placed his palm on the scanner and spoke his identification code clearly. The system hummed to life, cross-referencing his authorization with the emergency protocols that had been activated earlier that morning. "Access granted. Emergency override protocol active," the computerized voice announced. The massive steel door, hidden behind a facade of ancient oak, began to slide open with a soft mechanical whisper as the entrance revealed itself. James was struck by how different everything felt. The air that escaped from within carried an odd metallic taste, and the usual soft lighting that illuminated the vault's interior seemed dimmer somehow. He had been inside the royal vault only twice before in his career, both times as part of security sweeps before major state occasions. The space always felt charged with history and power, but today something else lingered in the atmosphere. "Your Majesty?" James called out as he stepped across the threshold. His voice echoed strangely in the vaulted space, as if the very walls were absorbing the sound. The vault stretched before him like a cathedral of treasures, with climate-controlled display cases lining the walls and filling the center of the room. Crown jewels glittered under specialized lighting. Ancient manuscripts lay protected behind bulletproof glass, and artifacts from 1,000 years of royal history created a maze of priceless beauty. But it was movement at the far end of the vault that caught his attention. There, standing before the most secure display case in the entire collection, was Queen Camilla. She stood perfectly still, her back to the entrance, dressed in a simple black dress that seemed to absorb the light around her. In her hands, she held something that made James's blood run cold. The Queen's coronation blade was one of the most sacred and dangerous artifacts in the royal collection, used in coronation ceremonies for over 8 centuries. The blade was said to hold the power to legitimize or delegitimize any claim to the throne. Legend claimed that the sword could only be wielded by the rightful monarch, and that in the wrong hands it would bring catastrophe upon the realm. "Your Majesty," James called again, louder this time. "I've been sent to check on your welfare. The palace staff is concerned about your extended stay in the vault." Camilla didn't turn around, but her voice carried clearly across the space. "Captain Morrison, isn't it? 25 years of loyal service. Decorated for bravery during the London Bridge incident. Married to Margaret, father of 2 daughters. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, but there was something underneath it that made James's hand instinctively move toward his weapon. "Yes, Your Majesty. I'm here to ensure your safety. Perhaps you'd like to return to your quarters. The king has been asking about you." Soft laugh escaped from Camilla, but she still didn't turn around. "The king? Yes. Charles has always been concerned about my whereabouts. But tell me, Captain, in all your years of service, have you ever wondered about the true nature of power? About what it really means to wear the crown?" James felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the vault's cool temperature. Protocol dictated that he should maintain respectful distance from any member of the royal family. But something about this situation was spiraling beyond normal parameters. The way Camilla held the blade, the strange quality in her voice. The very fact that she had somehow gained access to the most restricted artifact in the collection all pointed to a crisis he wasn't prepared to handle. "Your Majesty, I'm not qualified to discuss such matters. My concern is purely for your safety and security. If you could please replace the artifact and accompany me back to the main palace, I'm sure any questions you have can be addressed by more appropriate personnel." Finally, Camilla began to turn around. As she moved, the blade caught the light, sending dancing reflections across the vault's walls like scattered stars. When she faced him fully, James saw that her expression was not what he had expected. There was no madness in her eyes, no sign of distress or confusion. Instead, she looked at him with a clarity that was almost frightening in its intensity. "Captain Morrison, I appreciate your dedication to duty, but I'm afraid the situation is far more complicated than your briefing indicated. You see, I didn't break into this vault. I was invited here by someone who has been waiting a very long time to meet with me." The radio on James's shoulder crackled again, but this time the voice was different, urgent. "Captain Morrison, respond immediately. We're showing additional heat signatures in your location. You are not alone in that vault." As the words sank in, James realized that the shadows around the vault's perimeter weren't just tricks of the lighting. They were moving. James instinctively reached for his sidearm, but Camilla raised the coronation blade in a gesture that was both warning and invitation. The ancient steel seemed to pulse with its own inner light, casting strange patterns on the vault's walls that moved independently of any visible light source. "I wouldn't recommend that." "Captain," came a voice from the shadows. An elderly woman stepped into the light, her appearance so sudden and silent that James wondered if she had been there all along. She was dressed in clothes that seemed to belong to another century, with a long dark coat that brushed the floor and silver hair pulled back in an elaborate bun. Most unsettling were her eyes, which held the weight of decades and seemed to see right through him. "Lady Margaret Thornfield," Camilla said, as if introducing an old friend at a garden party. "Captain Morrison, allow me to present the former keeper of the royal mysteries, a position that was officially dissolved in 1952, but never actually abandoned." James felt his training kick in, despite the surreal nature of the situation. "Ma'am, I need to see identification and understand how you gained access to this secured area. This is a restricted zone with the highest level of security clearance required." Lady Thornfield smiled, and the expression transformed her stern features entirely. "My dear Captain, I've been coming to this vault since before you were born. I was here when they installed the first electronic locks. I'll likely be here long after the current security system becomes obsolete. Some access rights transcend the paperwork your superiors file." "She's been waiting for me," Camilla explained, still holding the blade with reverent care. "Waiting for the right moment to share something that the royal family has kept hidden for generations. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about the monarchy." The radio crackled again with increasing urgency. "Captain Morrison, we're reading 3 heat signatures now. Additional security is being dispatched to your location. Confirm your status immediately." James lifted the radio to respond, but Lady Thornfield held up a hand. "I wouldn't answer just yet, Captain. Once you bring more people into this situation, certain protocols will activate that cannot be undone. Give us 5 minutes to explain, and then you can make an informed decision about how to proceed." Against every instinct of his training, James found himself hesitating. There was something about the old woman's demeanor that commanded respect, and Camilla seemed perfectly lucid and in control of herself. The queen consort was known for her practical nature and sharp intelligence. If she was standing here holding the coronation blade and listening to this mysterious woman, there had to be a compelling reason. 5 minutes, he agreed, but kept his hand near his weapon. Then I'm following protocol, regardless of what you tell me. Lady Thornfield nodded approvingly. Very wise. Camilla, would you like to begin, or shall I? Camilla turned the blade slightly, and James noticed for the first time that there were inscriptions along its length that seemed to shift and change as the light hit them. Captain, what do you know about the true history of the British monarchy? Not the sanitized version taught in schools or displayed in museums, but the real story of how power has been maintained for over 1,000 years. I know what I need to know to do my job, Your Majesty. I protect the royal family and maintain the security of their properties and persons. Admirable, Lady Thornfield interjected, but insufficient for what's about to unfold. The coronation blade you see Camilla holding is not just a ceremonial weapon. It's a key, Captain. A key to something that has been locked away beneath this very castle since the Norman conquest. James felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The vault suddenly seemed smaller, the air thicker. What kind of key? Camilla stepped closer, and he could see that her hands were trembling slightly as she held the blade. The kind that unlocks secrets that could destabilize governments, Captain. The kind that reveals why certain bloodlines have maintained power across centuries of war, plague, and revolution. The kind that explains how a small island nation became the center of a global empire that the sun never set upon. Every monarchy has its legends and mysteries, James said, trying to maintain his skeptical composure. But at the end of the day, power comes from the consent of the people and the strength of institutions. Lady Thornfield laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, my dear boy, if only it were that simple. Tell me, in all your years of service, have you never wondered why Windsor Castle was built precisely where it was? Why certain rooms are always kept locked, even from the highest security clearances? Why there are areas of the castle that don't appear on any architectural plans? Before James could answer, the blade in Camilla's hands began to emit a low, humming sound, almost musical in its quality. The inscriptions along its length were definitely moving now, flowing like liquid mercury across the ancient steel. It's responding, Camilla whispered. Lady Thornfield, I think we're running out of time. The elderly woman moved with surprising speed to one of the display cases along the far wall. She pressed her hand against what appeared to be solid stone, and a section of the wall swung inward with a grinding sound that spoke of mechanisms unused for decades. Captain Morrison, Lady Thornfield called over her shoulder, I need you to make a choice right now. You can follow your protocols, call in backup, and have us all detained while bureaucrats and politicians decide what to do with information they're not prepared to handle. Or you can trust that two intelligent women who have served the crown faithfully might have good reasons for breaking a few rules. The opening in the wall revealed a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. Ancient symbols were carved into the walls, and James could feel a draft of air coming from below that carried scents. He couldn't identify, but that made him think of very old places and very old secrets. His radio erupted with activity. Captain Morrison, security teams are at the vault entrance. What's your status? We're prepared to override the locks and enter. 30 seconds, Captain, Camilla said, her voice urgent but calm. In 30 seconds, this opportunity disappears forever. And some very dangerous people will spend the rest of their lives trying to figure out what we were really doing here. They'll tear apart this castle stone by stone, and they'll never find what we're about to show you because they don't understand what they're looking for. James looked at the mysterious staircase, then at Camilla, holding the now glowing blade, then at Lady Thornfield, who stood waiting with the patience of someone who had been preparing for this moment for decades. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the vault entrance. His backup had arrived. I'm either about to make the best decision of my career or the worst, James muttered, then spoke into his radio with the authority of his rank. Control, this is Captain Morrison. Situation is secure, but complex. I need you to establish a perimeter and hold all personnel at the vault entrance. Do not repeat, Do not enter the vault until you receive further instructions from me. Captain, that's an order. Control. I'll explain everything in due course, but right now I need absolute compliance with my instructions. He clicked off the radio and looked at the two women. Lead the way, but understand that my duty to the crown comes above everything else. If what you're about to show me threatens the royal family or the stability of the realm, I won't hesitate to stop you. Lady Thornfield smiled again, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. Captain Morrison, what we're about to show you has been protecting the royal family and the realm for nearly 1,000 years. The question is whether it can continue to do so, or whether the time has finally come to reveal the truth to the world. As they descended into the darkness, the coronation blade's glow intensified, illuminating carvings and passages that definitely did not appear on any architectural survey James had ever seen. The stone steps descended much deeper than James had expected, and the walls around them seemed to close in as they went lower. The coronation blade continued to pulse with its strange light, revealing intricate carvings that grew more elaborate the further they descended. What had started as simple geometric patterns near the surface evolved into complex scenes that seemed to tell a story James couldn't quite understand. These carvings, he said, running his finger along a particularly detailed section, showing figures in medieval dress gathered around what appeared to be an altar. They're not just decorative, are they? Lady Thornfield paused at a landing where the staircase turned sharply to the left. They're a historical record, Captain, one that predates most written accounts of British history by several centuries. What you're seeing carved into these walls is the true story of how the English monarchy came to power, and more importantly, how it has maintained that power through times when logic would suggest it should have fallen. Camilla held the blade higher, and its light revealed that the landing opened into a much larger space. My husband knows some of this history, but not all of it. Each monarch learns pieces of the truth, but the complete picture has been kept by the keepers for over 900 years. Until now, he entered what could only be described as an underground cathedral. The vaulted ceiling stretched high above them, supported by columns that were clearly much older than the castle above. Along the walls, shelves carved directly into the stone held artifacts that made the royal vault's collection seem modest by comparison. Books bound in leather and metal, scrolls wrapped in silk, and objects that seemed to defy easy categorization filled every available space. At the center of the room stood a circular stone platform, and rising from its middle was an elaborate pedestal, designed to hold something approximately the size and shape of the blade Camilla carried. But it was what surrounded the platform that made James catch his breath. 12 stone figures, each about 7 feet tall, stood in a perfect circle around the central dais. They were carved with such skill that they seemed almost alive, and each figure represented a different era of British history. James could make out Norman knights, Tudor courtiers, Georgian nobles, and Victorian dignitaries. But their faces were too lifelike, too individual to be mere artistic representations. They're portraits, he whispered, understanding dawning on him. These are actual people, the previous keepers, Lady Thornfield confirmed. Each one served during a critical period in the monarchy's history. Each one helped guide the realm through challenges that could have ended the royal lineage forever. And each one made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the continuity of the crown. Camilla approached the central platform, the blade humming more intensely with each step. Captain, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but you'll see the evidence with your own eyes. The British monarchy doesn't survive because of political skill or military might, or even public support. Though all of those things matter, it survives because of what lies beneath this castle, what has always lain beneath this castle, since long before William the Conqueror claimed these lands. What are you talking about? James asked, though part of him was beginning to suspect that he didn't really want to know the answer, lady. Thornfield gestured to the walls around them. This chamber wasn't built by human hands, Captain. It was discovered by the Normans when they first broke ground for the castle's foundations. What they found here changed everything they thought. They knew about power and authority and the divine right of kings, the blade and Camilla's. Hands was now glowing so brightly that it cast shadows that seemed to move independently. As she stepped onto the platform, the stone beneath her feet began to emit a soft blue light that spread outward in intricate patterns. For nearly 1,000 years, each generation of monarchs has drawn upon something ancient and powerful that sleeps beneath this castle. It's not magic in the way fairy tales describe it, but it's not entirely natural either. It's something that existed here long before humans arrived in Britain. Something that recognizes authority and responds to it. James felt the ground beneath his feet vibrating slightly, as if some enormous mechanism was beginning to wake up. You're talking about the source of royal power being literally supernatural. I'm talking about the source of royal power being something we don't fully understand but have learned to work with, Camilla corrected. Every coronation, every major decision, every moment of crisis when the monarchy could have fallen, but somehow survived, it all traces back to this chamber and what lies beneath it. She raised the blade above her head, and the entire chamber responded. The stone figures around the platform seemed to shift slightly, as if turning to watch. The patterns of light in the floor grew brighter and more complex, forming symbols that hurt James's eyes to look at directly. But something has changed, Lady Thornfield said, her voice urgent now. The old compact is breaking down. The power that has sustained the monarchy for centuries is beginning to withdraw its support. We can feel it weakening, becoming more selective about when and how it responds to royal commands. And you think the solution is to bring more people into this secret? James asked. To risk everything by revealing what you've kept hidden for 1,000 years? Camilla lowered the blade and turned to face him, her expression serious but not unkind. Captain, the secret is already coming apart. There have been incidents, anomalies that our most trusted advisors can't explain or contain. Rooms in the castle that change their dimensions overnight, staff members who report seeing people in period dress walking the corridors, people who vanish when approached, electronic systems that malfunction in patterns that suggest intelligence behind the disruptions. The entity beneath the castle is becoming restless, Lady Thornfield added. It's been patient for centuries, content to work through intermediaries and maintain the illusion that human beings are actually in control of their own destiny. But patience isn't infinite, even for something that exists on a timescale we can barely comprehend. James felt his radio crackling again, and this time he couldn't ignore it. Captain Morrison, we have a situation developing at ground level. Unknown individuals are attempting to access the East Wing. They claim to have authority that supersedes palace security, but their credentials don't match anything in our database. What kind of individuals? James asked, though he suspected he already knew. Government types, sir. Very serious, very well equipped, and very insistent that they need immediate access to your location. Camilla and Lady Thornfield exchanged a glance that spoke of fears confirmed. They know, Camilla said simply. Someone has been monitoring the situation, probably for months. The increased activity down here has triggered alarms we weren't aware existed. Who are they? James demanded. People who believe that power should be more evenly distributed, Lady Thornfield replied. People who think that nearly 1,000 years of monarchy is quite enough, and that it's time for Britain to join the ranks of truly democratic republics. People who would be very interested to learn that the royal family's authority rests on something other than tradition and public consent. The blade in Camilla's hand suddenly flared with brilliant light, and the entire chamber shook as if in response to some distant impact. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and several of the ancient artifacts on the stone shelves rattled ominously. They're trying to break into the vault, James realized, using explosives or heavy machinery, which means we have perhaps 10 minutes before this location is compromised, Lady Thornfield said, with remarkable calm. Camilla, you need to complete the ritual now, or we'll lose our chance entirely. What ritual? James asked, but as soon as the words left his mouth, he understood what was happening. Camilla was preparing to place the coronation blade into the pedestal at the center of the platform. To make direct contact with whatever lay beneath the castle. Once that blade touches the pedestal, he said, there's no going back, is there? No, Camilla agreed. But Captain, the alternative is watching everything collapse anyway. At least this way, We maintain some control over how the truth comes out. Royal Guard Story Part 4. The chamber shook again. More violently this time, and James could hear the distant sound of machinery grinding through stone and steel. His radio erupted with confused chatter as security teams above tried to coordinate their response to what they clearly didn't understand. "Captain Morrison," came Commander Chen's voice. "Tight with stress, we have multiple breaches in the East Wing. Unknown parties have gained access to restricted areas using equipment and authorization codes that shouldn't exist. I need you to secure whatever you're protecting down there and prepare for immediate extraction."
Ow.
James looked at Camilla, who was now standing directly in front of the pedestal with the coronation blade raised in both hands. The weapon's glow had become so intense that it was difficult to look at directly, and the patterns of light spreading across the chamber floor were beginning to pulse in rhythm with something that sounded almost like a heartbeat. "Your Majesty," he said, "if you're going to do something, it needs to be now." Lady Thornfield moved to one of the stone shelves and began pulling down ancient texts, handling them with practiced efficiency despite their obvious age and fragility. "Captain, I need you to understand what's about to happen. When Camilla places that blade into the pedestal, she's not just accessing the power beneath the castle. She's entering into direct communication with an intelligence that has been guiding human affairs for longer than recorded history. And that intelligence might not be happy about being disturbed," James guessed. "It's been trying to communicate for months," Camilla said. Her voice strained with concentration as she fought to keep the blade steady. "The incidents I mentioned, the anomalies throughout the castle, they're not random. They're attempts to get our attention, to warn us about something." Another explosion echoed from above, and this time pieces of the ceiling began to fall. James activated his radio with growing urgency. "Control, this is Morrison. Whatever's happening up there, you need to contain it. No one gets through to this location under any circumstances." "Sir, I don't think we can stop them. They have equipment we've never seen before, and they seem to know exactly where they're going. Some kind of scanning technology that's mapping the castle's internal structure in real time." James cursed under his breath. Advanced scanning equipment would eventually locate this chamber, no matter how well it had been hidden over the centuries. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 5 minutes before they find whatever access route you used." Lady Thornfield looked up from her frantic gathering of documents. "That's enough time, if Camilla acts now." "But Captain, once this process begins, you're going to see and hear things that will challenge everything you believe about reality. I need to know that you're prepared for that." "I stopped being prepared for anything about 20 minutes ago," James replied. "Just tell me what you need me to do." Camilla took a deep breath and began to lower the blade toward the pedestal. As it approached the specially carved depression at the top, the entire chamber filled with a sound that was part musical harmony, part mechanical hum, and part something else entirely that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his bones. The moment the blade makes contact, Lady Thornfield called over the growing noise. "Everything changes. The entity beneath the castle will be able to communicate directly with us, but it will also become aware of the immediate threat to its privacy. It won't react well to the intrusion." The coronation blade touched the pedestal with a sound like a bell tolling underwater. The chamber instantly filled with blinding light, and James felt something that could only be described as a presence pressing against his mind. It wasn't hostile, exactly, but it was so vast and alien that his human consciousness could barely process its edges. Images flooded his awareness. He saw the same chamber as it had existed centuries ago, filled with robed figures who chanted in languages that predated English. He saw Norman knights kneeling before the pedestal while something invisible whispered instructions about conquest and consolidation. He saw Tudor monarchs drawing upon ancient wisdom to navigate religious upheavals that could have torn the kingdom apart. But he also saw something else, a growing awareness within the entity that the world above was changing to, quickly for its ancient methods to remain effective. Democratic movements, global communications, scientific advancement that made old-fashioned notions of divine authority harder to maintain. The intelligence beneath the castle was struggling to adapt to a reality where power could no longer be exercised through mystique and tradition alone. It's been trying to tell us. Camilla's voice reached him through the overwhelming sensory input. Though she seemed to be speaking from very far away, The old compact isn't sustainable. The world has evolved beyond what it was designed to handle. James forced himself to focus on the immediate situation. The presence in his mind was communicating something urgent about the people breaking into the castle above them. Not just government agents, he realized with growing alarm, but representatives of other intelligences. Other ancient powers that had remained hidden in other parts of the world. Powers that were no longer content to work through human intermediaries. Lady Thornfield, he managed to say. Though speaking required enormous effort, the people upstairs aren't just trying to expose royal secrets. They're trying to claim this place for something else. The elderly woman nodded grimly, still gathering documents with mechanical precision. We suspected as much. The entity has been warning us about incursions from other sources of power, other ancient intelligences that want to establish their own control over human affairs. They've been patient for centuries, but recent global instability has made them more aggressive. The chamber shook again, and this time the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the stone staircase. Their pursuers had found the hidden entrance. Camilla, Lady Thornfield called urgently, "You need to complete the connection now. Give it permission to act directly." "What does that mean?" James demanded, though part of him already understood what they were asking. For 1,000 years, the intelligence beneath the castle has worked through human agents, guiding events subtly and indirectly. But if direct action becomes necessary to protect itself and the stability it represents, it needs explicit authorization from the current monarch. Camilla's hands tightened on the blade, which was now fully merged with the pedestal and glowing with the intensity of a small star. "I give you permission to defend yourself and those under your protection by whatever means you judge necessary." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The entire castle shuddered, as something vast and powerful stirred to full consciousness for the first time in centuries. James felt the presence expanding outward, flowing through the stones and mortars of Windsor Castle like water through a sponge, assessing every room, every corridor, every person within its boundaries. The footsteps on the staircase suddenly stopped. "Control," James said into his radio. "Report status of the intruders." The response came after a long pause, and Commander Chen's voice sounded confused and slightly frightened. "Sir, this is going to sound impossible, but they've just stopped. All of them. They're standing perfectly still throughout the castle, like statues. Their breathing and their vital signs are normal, but they won't respond to any stimuli. The entity is evaluating them," Lady Thornfield explained, "determining which ones represent genuine threats and which ones are just following orders they don't understand." Through the blade, Camilla was receiving direct communication from the intelligence, and her expression grew increasingly troubled as the exchange continued. Finally, she looked up at James and Lady Thornfield with fear in her eyes. "It says the situation is worse than we realized. The other powers aren't just trying to claim this location. They're coordinating a global effort to overthrow all existing governmental structures and establish direct rule by ancient intelligences." This was supposed to be the first step in a much larger plan. "And now?" James asked. "Now it's decided that subtlety is no longer an option." Royal Guard Story, Part 5. The chamber fell into an eerie silence as the presence beneath the castle expanded its influence throughout Windsor and beyond. James could feel it through the stone floor, through the air itself. A vast intelligence awakening from centuries of patient dormancy to confront a threat it had never faced before. "Captain," his radio crackled with Commander Chin's increasingly bewildered voice. "We're getting reports from London, Edinburgh, Cardiff, and Belfast. Government buildings, military installations, and historical sites throughout the kingdom are experiencing simultaneous power fluctuations and communication disruptions. Whatever's happening at your location seems to be spreading." Lady Thornfield looked up from the ancient texts she had been consulting, her face pale but determined. "It's activating dormant sites throughout Britain. Every location where royal authority has been formally established, every castle and palace, and official residence, they're all connected through the same network that we've just awakened here." Camilla still stood with her hands on the coronation blade, her connection to the entity growing stronger with each passing moment. Through that link, Information flowed that changed her understanding of everything she had believed about the monarchy and its role in the world. "James," she said, using his first name for the first time, "I need you to contact your superiors and deliver a message. But I need you to understand that once you relay this information, there will be no going back to the way things were before, Your Majesty." At this point, I don't think that was ever an option. She nodded, accepting the truth of his words. "The entity is showing me things, not just about Britain, but about similar arrangements that exist in other countries. Ancient powers that have guided human civilization from the shadows, each one believing that its approach to governance and social order is the correct one." You're talking about other royal families? Other monarchies? I'm talking about something much broader than that. Democratic governments, corporate hierarchies, religious institutions, military organizations, many of the power structures that humans believe they created and control are actually elaborate facades maintained by intelligences that predate human civilization. James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground chamber's cool temperature. And now, these intelligences are fighting each other for control? They're trying to establish direct rule because the old indirect methods are breaking down. Global communications, social media, the internet, it's becoming impossible to maintain the illusion of human autonomy when information spreads so quickly and people can coordinate resistance so effectively. Lady Thornfield gathered the last of her documents and moved toward the staircase. The intruders upstairs aren't just trying to seize this location. They're trying to establish a beachhead for a much larger invasion. Representatives of powers that view the current arrangement as inefficient and outdated. What kind of powers? Ancient intelligences that have been dormant beneath other nations and continents. Waiting for the right moment to emerge from hiding, Lady Thornfield explained as she organized her precious documents. Some that favor absolute control through fear and force, others that believe human free will is an evolutionary mistake that needs to be corrected. They see the current global chaos as an opportunity to establish new forms of governance that make medieval monarchy look like anarchic freedom. The coronation blade began to pulse with a different rhythm, and Camilla's expression grew more urgent. "It's telling me that we have perhaps 30 minutes before the other powers coordinate their next move. The people frozen throughout the castle are just the advanced scouts. The real threat is gathering strength at locations around the world." James activated his radio with growing determination. "Control, patch me through to the highest authority available. I don't care if you have to wake the Prime Minister or contact Buckingham Palace directly. This situation has escalated beyond anything our normal protocols can handle. Sir, I'm already in contact with Downing Street, and they're requesting immediate updates on your status. There are similar incidents occurring at government facilities throughout Europe. The French are reporting strange phenomena at Versailles, the Germans at Neuschwanstein, and the Spanish at the Royal Palace in Madrid." "Tell them," Camilla said, her voice carrying the full authority of her position, "that Queen Camilla is implementing Emergency Protocol 7. Under the Crown Powers Act, all governmental and military resources are to be placed under direct royal command until further notice." James stared at her. "Your Majesty, Protocol 7 hasn't been invoked since World War II. It essentially declares martial law and suspends parliamentary authority. The situation warrants it, Captain. The entity is showing me what the other powers intend to do if they succeed in breaking our defenses. Mass population control through direct neural manipulation. The elimination of individual consciousness in favor of collective minds managed by ancient intelligences. The transformation of human civilization into something that serves the purposes of beings that view us as we might view domesticated animals." Lady Thornfield had finished her preparations and was now standing at the base of the staircase, listening to sounds from above. The frozen intruders are beginning to move again. Whatever force was holding them has decided they're not the primary threat and is redirecting its attention elsewhere. James asked. "To the source of their authority?" "The entity is tracing their command structure back through layers of human intermediaries to find the intelligence that sent them here." She paused, tilting her head as if listening to something only she could hear. It's found 3 primary nexus points. One beneath the Pentagon in Washington, one beneath the Kremlin in Moscow, and one beneath what appears to be a corporate headquarters in Geneva. Camilla's connection to the blade intensified, and when she spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from the intelligence itself. The Swiss location is the coordination center. The intelligence there is older and more sophisticated than the others. It's been manipulating global financial systems for centuries, engineering economic crises and recoveries to gradually concentrate power into fewer and fewer human hands. Hands that it controls, James realized. Hands that it thought it controlled. But even that intelligence is discovering that modern human society has evolved beyond what any of them anticipated. The systems they created to manage us have become too complex for them to fully comprehend or direct. The chamber shook again, but this time the vibrations seemed to come from every direction at once. Through the blade, the entity was communicating directly with its counterparts at other royal sites throughout Britain. Coordinating a response to the emerging threat, Captain Morrison, his radio announced. We're receiving reports that the individuals who breached our security are requesting immediate communication with whoever is in the vault. They claim to have information about a coordinated attack on government installations worldwide. They're trying to negotiate, Lady Thornfield observed, probably hoping to establish some kind of temporary truce while they regroup for a more effective assault. Camilla slowly began to withdraw her hands from the coronation blade, though the weapon remained locked into the pedestal and continued to glow with supernatural light. The entity is giving me a choice. We can attempt to maintain the old status quo, continue the hidden partnership between human monarchy and ancient intelligence, and hope that we can adapt quickly enough to stay ahead of the other powers. Or we can take a much more drastic step. What kind of step? James asked, though he suspected he already knew. Full disclosure. Complete revelation of the truth about how human civilization has actually been managed for the past several millennia. The entity is willing to emerge from hiding, to work openly with human governments, instead of through secret partnerships with royal families. The implications hit James like a physical blow. You're talking about the end of the monarchy as a political institution. If people learn that royal authority comes from partnership with non-human intelligence, the entire concept of hereditary rule becomes meaningless. But it might be the only way to prevent something much worse, Camilla replied. The other powers are counting on secrecy and confusion to establish their control. If the truth comes out on our terms, if we can control how the revelation unfolds, we might be able to maintain enough stability to resist their influence. Lady Thornfield nodded gravely. The entity has been considering this possibility for decades. It understands that the age of hidden guidance is ending, whether we choose to end it or not. The question is whether we reveal the truth while we still have some control over the process, or wait until it's exposed by our enemies. James felt the weight of history pressing down on him as he realized that the next few minutes would determine the future of human civilization. What do you need me to do? Camilla looked at him with gratitude and resolve. Help us contact every government leader who might be willing to listen to an impossible story, and then help us prove that every impossible word of it is true. The next hour unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of revelation and chaos. James found himself at the center of communications that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier, relaying messages between Queen Camilla, world leaders, and an ancient intelligence that spoke through patterns of light and vibration that somehow translated directly into human understanding. The first call was to the Prime Minister, who initially responded with the expected skepticism until every electronic device in Downing Street began displaying the same message simultaneously. The hidden partnership between the British Crown and the Guardian of the Realm is now acknowledged. Prepare for full disclosure. Similar demonstrations occurred at government facilities worldwide as other allied intelligences chose to reveal themselves rather than risk being exposed by hostile forces. The President of France found himself in direct communication with an entity that had been guiding the Republic from beneath the foundations of the Buckingham Palace. The German Chancellor discovered that certain decisions attributed to democratic processes had actually been influenced by something that had been awakening gradually beneath Berlin since the reunification. But not all revelations were peaceful. James monitored radio traffic as military units around the world reported encounters with phenomena that defied conventional explanation. The Pentagon's basement levels had been sealed off after personnel reported corridors that led to chambers that couldn't possibly exist within the building's known architecture. In Moscow, the Kremlin's security forces were dealing with what could only be described as a controlled possession event, where key officials were speaking with voices and knowledge that clearly weren't their own. "The Swiss situation is escalating," Lady Thornfield reported, consulting documents that seemed to update themselves as she read. "The intelligence there has activated what appears to be a network of financial institutions worldwide. Stock markets are experiencing coordinated fluctuations that spell out messages in multiple languages, all demanding immediate cessation of the disclosure process." Camilla maintained her connection to the coronation blade, serving as a conduit for communications between the awakened intelligences and human governments. The strain was beginning to show on her face, but her voice remained steady as she coordinated. Humanity's first open diplomatic contact, with powers that had shaped civilization from the shadows. "Entity is sharing technical specifications," she announced. "Designs for communication systems that will allow direct interface between human consciousness and the intelligences without requiring physical artifacts like the blade. But the technology is challenging to implement safely." James looked at the readings his technical team was providing through encrypted channels. The energy signatures emanating from Windsor Castle were being detected by scientific instruments around the world, and the pattern matched similar signatures appearing at dozens of other locations. "Your Majesty, the scientific community is going to want answers. This level of energy manipulation is beyond anything in our current understanding of physics."
"Then we'll give them answers," she replied.
"The entity is prepared to share knowledge that will advance human understanding by centuries. Clean energy, space travel, medical techniques that could eliminate most diseases, but only if humanity proves capable of handling the truth about its own history." The coronation blade pulsed with sudden urgency, and Camilla's expression grew alarmed. "The Geneva intelligence is making its final move. It's attempting to trigger a global economic collapse to create enough chaos to establish direct control over major population centers. Activated emergency protocols that connected him directly to international crisis management networks. All stations, this is Windsor Control. We need immediate confirmation of financial system stability worldwide. Report any anomalous trading patterns or unauthorized access to central banking networks." The responses came back within minutes, and they painted a picture of coordinated assault on global economic infrastructure. Automated trading systems were executing transactions that made no economic sense but followed patterns that suggested intelligent design. Currency exchanges were fluctuating in ways that spelled out demands in binary code. Central banks were reporting unauthorized access attempts that seemed to anticipate security measures before they were implemented. "It's trying to prove that human civilization is too fragile to govern itself," Lady Thornfield observed. "Create enough economic instability, and people will accept any authority that promises to restore order." "Can the entity stop it?" James asked. Camilla's connection to the blade deepened, and for a moment her features seemed to reflect something vast and ancient looking out through human eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the stone chamber. "It can, but doing so will require revealing capabilities that will fundamentally change how humans understand their relationship with technology and consciousness." "What do you mean?" "The global financial system, the internet, satellite communications, even the electrical grid, they're all more connected than humans realize. The intelligences have been using these networks for centuries, guiding information flow and energy distribution in subtle ways. To stop the Geneva attack, the entity will need to take direct control of these systems, and that control will be visible to every human on Earth." James felt the magnitude of the moment settling on his shoulders like a physical weight. "You're talking about the end of the illusion that humans control their own technology. We're talking about the beginning of a partnership that should have been open from the start," Camilla corrected. "The entity is offering to share control rather than take it, to work with human governments instead of through them. But it needs authorization from legitimate human authority to act on this scale. And as Queen Consort, you have that authority? As the current representative of a 1,000-year partnership between the Crown and the Guardian of the Realm, I have the authority to evolve that partnership into something new. She looked at James with determination that reminded him why she had been chosen to marry into the royal family. Captain Morrison, I need you to witness and record what I'm about to do. For legal and historical purposes, someone needs to document that this decision was made by humans, of our own free will. With full understanding of the consequences, James activated his personal recording device and positioned himself where he could observe both Camilla and the coronation blade. Recording commenced. State your full name and authority for the record. I am Camilla, Queen Consort of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth. By the authority vested in me through marriage to the sovereign and partnership with the guardian of the realm, I hereby authorize the expansion of our alliance to include direct cooperation with all benevolent intelligences worldwide for the purpose of preserving human autonomy and resisting the establishment of involuntary control over human consciousness. The coronation blade flared with light so intense that James had to shield his eyes. Throughout the chamber, the stone figures of previous keepers seemed to nod in approval, as centuries of hidden guidance transformed into open partnership. Above them, he could hear the sounds of the castle itself changing, ancient mechanisms awakening that had slept since the Norman conquest. His radio erupted with reports from around the world. The financial attacks had stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Communication networks that had been compromised were reporting normal function. But more significantly, governments worldwide were receiving direct communications from intelligences that introduced themselves openly for the first time in human history. Ladies and gentlemen, James said into his recording device, it appears that human civilization just grew up. 6 months later, Captain James Morrison stood in the same underground chamber, now converted into a formal embassy between human governments and the collective of guardian intelligences. The stone figures of previous keepers had been joined by holographic representations of the current diplomatic council, where elected human representatives worked, alongside ancient intelligences to address challenges that neither species could handle alone. The revelation had not been without its difficulties. Some governments had collapsed, unable to accept the truth about their own origins. Religious institutions worldwide had struggled to reconcile ancient texts with the reality of non-human intelligences that had guided human development. Economic systems had required complete restructuring as the hidden manipulation of centuries was revealed and replaced with transparent cooperation. But humanity had adapted, as it always had. The technologies shared by the guardian intelligences had eliminated poverty, disease, and environmental destruction within months. Space exploration had advanced by centuries in a single year. Most importantly, the other hostile intelligences had withdrawn their influence rather than face unified resistance from the Human Guardian Alliance. Camilla, now bearing the formal title of First Human Ambassador to the Collective, still visited the chamber regularly. The coronation blade remained in its pedestal. It's no longer a secret key, but a symbol of partnership between species separated by millions of years of evolution, but united by the UCS.